Good evening, and welcome back to Midnight History. Tonight, we journey to the sands of ancient Egypt, a land where the Nile flowed like a ribbon of life and pyramids touched the sky. This world of sun, stone, and silence has always held a special mystery. In this video, you will hear 100 gentle facts about ancient Egypt, facts about its gods and rulers, its daily rhythms, its art and monuments, and the quiet echoes it has left behind. Each fact is written softly, meant not to overwhelm, but to guide you slowly into rest. So, settle into the night. Let your mind drift along the Nile under the stars as we begin this journey together. The Nile River was the lifeblood of ancient Egypt. Each year it flooded, leaving behind fertile soil that allowed crops to flourish. Farmers measured their lives by its rising and falling, planting when the waters receded and harvesting under the bright desert Sunday. The steady rhythm of the Nile was like a heartbeat for the civilization, a pulse that never failed. Even today, to imagine Egypt without the Nile is almost impossible. The Egyptians created one of the world's first writing surfaces using papyrus reeds from the Nile. Thin strips were pressed and dried into sheets, becoming the canvas for scribes to record prayers, accounts, and stories. In quiet chambers, the scratch of reed pens echoed softly as words took shape. Papyrus carried knowledge across generations, making thought and memory last far beyond a single lifetime. The pyramids, massive and enduring, rose from the desert like mountains of stone. They were built not only by slaves, as once thought, but also by skilled workers who lived in nearby villages. These builders ate bread, drank beer, and shared laughter as they worked under the blazing Sunday. Each block lifted was both labor and devotion, meant to honor the pharaoh and prepare him for eternity. The pyramids still stand, silent witnesses to that devotion. For the Egyptians, gods were everywhere in the river, in the sky, in the breath of life itself. Ra sailed the sun across the heavens, while Osiris ruled the afterlife and Isis guarded families with her love. Each household kept small shrines, whispering prayers at dawn or before sleep. The divine was woven into every moment, turning daily routines into sacred acts. In their faith, the Egyptians found both order and comfort. Hieroglyphs were more than writing, they were living symbols, carrying power and meaning. Scribes trained for years to master them, carving lines of wisdom into temple walls and tombs. To read them was to hear the voice of gods and kings, preserved in stone. Even a single symbol could hold layers of myth and magic. They remind us that in ancient Egypt, words themselves were believed to breathe with spirit. The Great Sphinx, with its lion's body and human face, has guarded the sands for thousands of years. Its gaze stretches across the desert, steady and timeless. Nobody knows exactly when it was built or whose likeness it carries, but its presence has always inspired awe. To stand before it at dawn is to feel watched by history itself. The Sphinx embodies mystery, a silence that speaks louder than words. Gold, lapis lazuli, and turquoise glittered in necklaces and rings worn by Egyptians. But these were not just decorations, they were amulets, believed to protect and bring luck. A scarab beetle, carved from stone, could symbolize rebirth, while the Eye of Horus promised safety. Even the poorest people sometimes carried simple charms. Each piece of jewelry was a prayer you could wear, a fragment of beauty tied to hope. Bread and beer were the staples of the Egyptian diet, shared by farmers, workers, and pharaohs alike. Bakeries baked loaves in clay ovens, filling the air with warm scents. Breweries produced thick, nourishing beer that tasted closer to porridge than modern drinks. Meals were simple but sustaining, binding the people together through shared flavors. Eating bread in Egypt was like sharing in the rhythm of life itself. Cats were revered in Egypt, seen as sacred protectors of homes and companions of the goddess Bastet. Families welcomed them into their households, believing they brought good fortune. Cats guarded grain from mice and curled up beside children at night. Their graceful movements and piercing eyes became symbols of divine mystery. In honoring cats, Egyptians honored both beauty and protection. The Nile was also a highway, its waters filled with boats carrying people and goods. Wooden vessels with billowing sails glided between cities, their reflections trembling on the current. Fishermen cast nets from small skiffs, while nobles drifted in larger boats adorned with color. The river connected lives as surely as it nourished them. To sail on the Nile was to join the great artery of Egypt's story. And so, as we leave behind the waters of the Nile and the whispers of the desert wind, we step into the everyday world of ancient Egypt. Beyond temples and horizons, life unfolded in kitchens, workshops, and fields. In the next 10 facts, we will walk closer to the people themselves, their food, their work, their families, and the rhythms that shape their days. Think of it as moving from the wide sky into the warmth of a home, where the story of Egypt breathes quietly in every corner. Markets in ancient Egypt bustled with life. Vendors sold bread, beer, fish, and vegetables, their voices blending into a chorus of trade. Bright fabrics and fragrant oils tempted passers-by, while children darted between stalls. Farmers brought baskets of dates and figs, fresh from their groves. The market was not just commerce, it was the heartbeat of community, a place where stories and goods intertwined. Egyptian farmers timed their planting and harvests to the Nile's floods. When the waters receded, they sowed wheat, barley, and flax into the black, fertile soil. Oxen pulled wooden plows, and families worked side by side in the fields. Songs accompanied their labor, carrying rhythm into long days. Farming was not only survival, it was a harmony with the river itself. Most Egyptians wore simple linen clothing, light and cool against the desert heat. Men dressed in kilts, while women wore long, straight dresses. Wealthier citizens added jewelry and finely pleated fabrics, while children often went barefoot. White linen symbolized purity, reflecting the sun's brilliance. Clothes were not only practical, but a statement of grace. Craftsmen filled Egyptian towns with skill and artistry. Potters shaped clay into jars, weavers spun flax into fabric, and carpenters built boats and furniture. Workshops echoed with the rhythm of hammers and chisels. Their hands left behind both tools for daily use and treasures fit for temples. Every craft was a quiet celebration of human ingenuity. Children in ancient Egypt played with toys carved from wood or molded from clay. They chased hoops, played with dolls, and swam in the Nile. Education began at home, with lessons in manners and chores. Sons of scribes might learn to read hieroglyphs, while daughters helped their mothers in the household. Childhood was simple, joyful, and close to family. Music was woven into Egyptian life, echoing in temples, homes, and celebrations. Harps, flutes, and drums carried melodies that honored gods or lifted spirits at festivals. Work songs lightened the burden of farmers and builders. Even in quiet evenings, soft notes filled the air. For Egyptians, music was both joy and devotion. Festivals brightened the Egyptian calendar, honoring gods with song, dance, and feasts. Streets filled with processions of priests carrying sacred images. Families shared food, neighbors laughed, and music drifted across the Nile. These moments broke the routine of labor and reminded people of the divine. Festivals were both celebration and renewal. Beyond cats, Egyptians also kept dogs, monkeys, and even birds as pets. These animals shared homes, guarded families, or provided companionship. Paintings show children playing with pets, their joy captured in timeless art. Animals were part of the household, both useful and beloved. To keep a pet was to bring nature into daily life. Meals were simple but flavorful. Bread, beer, onions, and fish made up the daily table, while the wealthy enjoyed honey, figs, and roasted meats. Spices added color to dishes, and cooking fires glowed in every village. Food was more than sustenance, it was the bond of family and community. Each meal was a quiet ritual of life. Life in Egypt followed the Sunday farmers, rose at dawn, workers filled workshops by midday, and families gathered at night. Temples echoed with prayers as the day unfolded. The desert heat dictated rest, while the cool evenings invited conversation. Every day was shaped by light, labor, and community. And now, as we leave the bustling markets, the laughter of children, and the steady rhythm of work along the Nile, we step closer to the shining heart of Egypt's power. Beyond the humble homes and daily meals stood the palaces of pharaohs, the keepers of divine authority. In the next 10 facts, we will walk into the world of kings and queens, their crowns heavy with gold, their lives bound to gods and eternity. Think of it as crossing a threshold from the warmth of village life into the grandeur of thrones and temples. The pharaoh was more than a king, he was seen as a living god. His word carried the weight of law, his presence a symbol of divine order. People believed he was chosen by the gods to keep balance in the world. Crowds bowed at his processions, their eyes lowered in awe. To serve the pharaoh was to serve eternity itself. Pharaohs lived in palaces built of mud brick, richly decorated with painted walls and lush gardens. Within these halls, courtiers, scribes, and guards moved in a constant flow. Perfumed air drifted through open courtyards, mingling with music from harps. The palace was both a home and a stage for power. Life inside carried the pulse of the kingdom. The pharaoh wore crowns to show his rule over Upper and Lower Egypt. The double crown combined red and white, a sign of unity. Crook and flail, carried in hand, symbolized guidance and strength. Each piece of regalia was heavy with meaning, binding human authority to divine will. The pharaoh's image shone with power. When Pharaoh appeared in public, processions dazzled the people. Chariots rolled through the streets, banners waved, and priests chanted hymns. Musicians played, and incense curled into the air. Citizens pressed forward for a glimpse of their god-king. The sight was both theater and devotion, a living reminder of majesty. Queens shared in power, sometimes ruling as pharaohs themselves. Nefertiti and Hatshepsut stand among history's most remarkable women. They led armies, built temples, and left behind monuments of stone. Their influence shaped not only politics, but also art and faith. In Egypt, queens carried both grace and authority. Within palace walls, banquets overflowed with food and music. Platters of roasted meats, fruits, and honey cakes filled the tables. Servants poured wine, while dancers and musicians entertained guests. Conversations drifted from politics to poetry. These nights revealed the wealth and elegance of royal life. Behind the throne stood a circle of advisors, viziers, generals, and scribes. They guided decisions, managed temples, and oversaw armies. Each word carried weight, shaping the kingdom's fate. In quiet chambers, scrolls unrolled, revealing plans and records. Pharaoh's strength was magnified by the wisdom around him. Pharaohs prepared their tombs long before death. Artisans painted walls with sacred scenes, workers carved passages deep into stone, and treasures were gathered for the afterlife. These tombs were not just graves, they were eternal palaces. The work echoed a belief that life and death flowed into each other. The pharaoh was the high priest of Egypt, offering rituals to gods on behalf of the people. He stood at the center of faith, linking earth and heaven. Temples resounded with prayers, drums, and incense at his command. To see Pharaoh was to see the God's will alive. He was both ruler and bridge to the divine. The reigns of pharaohs left legacies in stone and story, their names carved into temples, their statues rising above courtyards, their deeds remembered in song. Generations look back to them as models of strength and divinity. Even now, their monuments tower against the desert sky. Pharaohs shaped Egypt, and Egypt shaped the world. As we leave the courts of pharaohs and the glitter of royal banquets, our path now leads to the monuments that still rise from the desert. The pyramids, the Sphinx, and temples carved in stone stand as echoes of ambition and belief. In the next 10 facts, we will wander through architecture that defied time, marvels that whisper across millennia. Imagine walking among these giants under the desert sun, each stone a memory of eternity. The temples of Egypt were covered with hieroglyphs, each symbol carved with patience and care. They told stories of gods, kings, and offerings made to the heavens. Priests and scribes believed these words held power beyond speech, almost alive upon the stone. As sunlight shifted, shadows moved across the carvings like whispers of time. Even broken walls still carry the echo of those ancient messages. The Great Sphinx of Giza, with its lion's body and human face, watched over the desert with quiet strength. No one knows for certain which pharaoh it represents, but its eyes have looked upon countless dawns. Sand buried it for centuries, only to be uncovered again by time and wind. Tourists and travelers have always felt its presence majestic, mysterious, unblinking. To stand before the Sphinx is to stand before a question carved in stone. The goddess Hathor was worshipped as the protector of joy, love, and music. Cows, her sacred animals, were often kept in temple precincts. People brought offerings of milk, flowers, and song, hoping to receive her blessings. Festivals in her honor were filled with music and dancing, a rare moment of carefree happiness. In her image, Egyptians saw both motherhood and divine comfort. Tall obelisks of granite rose in pairs before temple gates. Their tips, once covered in shining metal, caught the first light of the Sunday carved with hieroglyphs. They were monuments of memory and devotion. Many still stand today, in Egypt and far beyond, carried away by emperors who admired them. Each obelisk remains a finger of stone pointing upward, uniting earth and sky. Pharaohs wore crowns that signified their rule over Upper and Lower Egypt. The tall white crown of the south and the red crown of the north were often combined into one. These headdresses were more than decoration, they were symbols of cosmic order, the balance of the two lands. Sculptures show pharaohs in these crowns, timeless in their authority. The crowns themselves told a story of unity. On the banks of the Nile, great temples rose in Luxor and Karnak. Colossal columns lined their halls, painted once with colors that time has faded. Pilgrims came to honor the gods, their footsteps echoing in the vast stone corridors. Festivals filled the streets as sacred statues were carried by priests. Even in ruins, these temples breathe with grandeur, shadows stretching like eternal prayers. Egyptians wore amulets shaped like scarabs, eyes, and ankhs to guard against harm. Some were carved from bright stones, others molded from simple clay. Mothers placed them on children, soldiers carried them into battle, and travelers kept them close on journeys. Each charm was a silent prayer, carried in the folds of daily life. In them, faith became something one could hold. Egyptians followed a calendar of 365 days, guided by the rising of the star Sirius and the flooding of the Nile. This cycle of time tied heaven and earth together. Farmers planted when the waters receded, trusting the calendar's rhythm. Festivals and rituals were timed by its order, shaping the year with sacred precision. Their calendar, born of rivers and stars, is an ancestor of our own. Across the golden sands, caravans of traders moved slowly with donkeys and camels. They carried gold, incense, and precious stones from distant lands. At night, fires flickered among the dunes, while songs and stories kept travelers company. These journeys were long and dangerous, yet they bound Egypt to a wider world. Each caravan was a thread weaving deserts into connection. The pyramids stood as stairways to the heavens, built with stone blocks heavier than men could imagine. Workers labored under the sun, aligning each side to the cardinal points. Inside, chambers held treasures, prayers, and the hope of eternal life. The desert wind has touched them for thousands of years, yet they endure. To look at a pyramid is to see human hands shaping eternity. We have now walked through 40 gentle truths of ancient Egypt, from the whisper of desert winds to the majesty of pyramids. Each fact has been a small window, showing us the daily lives, the sacred beliefs, and the timeless wonders of this ancient land. As we move onward, let us go deeper into their rituals, their artistry, and their connection with the stars. The story of Egypt is far from over. It stretches ahead like the Nile itself, winding and endless. Beneath the cliffs of Thebes lay the Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs prepared for eternity. Tunnels carved deep into rock held painted walls and hidden treasures. Torches once lit the way for priests carrying sacred offerings. Each tomb was a secret house of the afterlife, sealed with prayers and stone. Even now, their silence feels heavy with mystery. Inside the tombs, colors still shine after thousands of years. Blues, reds, and golds tell stories of gods, boats sailing through the afterlife, and families reunited. Artists painted not for the living, but for the soul's eternal journey. Their brushstrokes were blessings meant to last beyond death. To gaze upon these walls is to see ancient hope made visible. Egyptians believed in guiding the soul through the afterlife with magic spells. The Book of the Dead was written on papyrus, filled with prayers, hymns, and instructions. It told the soul how to pass trials, avoid dangers, and reach paradise. Families buried copies with their loved ones, words acting as invisible guardians. These scrolls were maps to eternity. In Egyptian belief, every soul faced judgment before Osiris, Lord of the underworld. The heart was weighed against the feather of truth. A heart heavy with wrongdoing was devoured by Ammit, the devourer. A pure heart, light as the feather, entered the eternal fields of peace. This vision gave people hope and a reason to live with balance. When preparing the dead, priests carefully placed organs into canopic jars. Each jar had a lid shaped like a sacred head: falcon, jackal, baboon, and human. They were guarded by the sons of Horus, divine protectors of the body. These jars stood beside the coffin, waiting for the soul's return. Small yet powerful, they carried faith in life beyond life. Mummification was a sacred art, meant to preserve the body for the afterlife. Priests wrapped linen with care, chanting prayers as they worked. Oils and resins gave fragrance to the silent chamber. What remains today are faces and hands still visible after thousands of years. In these preserved forms, the ancient desire for eternity still speaks. Wealthy nobles and pharaohs were buried in coffins, decorated with gold and painted eyes. The most famous is Tutankhamun's mask, gleaming with lapis and turquoise. These coffins were not only protection, but symbols of divinity. To lie within them was to be reborn as something more than human. Their brilliance endures even as empires fade. Egyptians imagined paradise as the field of reeds, a land of endless harvest. Fields were always green, the Nile forever gentle, and families reunited. It was a place without hunger or pain, where the soul lived in peace. Farmers tilled their fields, children laughed, and loved ones shared food once more. This was their vision of heaven, familiar, simple, and eternal. Beside many tombs, wooden boats were buried for the soul's journey. These vessels symbolize safe passage across the waters of the underworld. Some were large enough to carry crews, carefully built from cedar. The idea was clear. The dead would sail as they once had on the Nile. Each boat was a promise of safe arrival in eternity. Deep within the earth, the tombs of Egypt remain hushed and still. Dust gathers on stone steps, and echoes linger in carved halls. For those who enter, there is a sense of being watched by time itself. The air feels thick with memory, as if the walls remember every prayer. The silence of these places is a voice older than words. We have now journeyed halfway, exploring temples, pyramids, and the tombs of kings. The first 50 facts have carried us through daily life, through faith, and into the mysteries of death and eternity. As we continue, we will step further into the arts, the sciences, and the connections Egypt shared with the wider world. The story is vast, and the Nile flows on. We have now drifted together through 50 gentle facts of ancient Egypt, from the flowing waters of the Nile to the silent tombs of the kings. We have walked among temples, fields, and eternal pyramids. Each moment has been a small window into a civilization that still whispers across the sands of time. For now, let us pause here, at the halfway mark of our journey. Close your eyes and imagine the desert night falling over the Nile, stars glimmering above the ancient stones. The story of Egypt is vast, and what we have seen so far is only the beginning. In Part 2, we will return to wander even further into their arts, their sciences, their gods, and the mysteries they left behind. Until then, rest well, dream softly, and let the voices of ancient Egypt carry you into sleep.